walking through activating the pump and the proper steps to initiate your pump. Steve, our pump operator here, is going to show us what's going on here. So when you first pull into the scene, first thing you do, activate your parking brake. That's activated, we're good. Steve says we're good. Following that, we're going to go ahead and put the truck into neutral. We're in neutral, we're already there. Now that that's good, we need to go ahead and shift power from the road gear to the pump gear. Remember, the engine right now is going through the transfer case to drive power to the wheels. We need to disconnect that and connect power to our pump. And that's done by this lever right here. You can see, you go to a neutral point in the center and then down the pump. When the green light is on, that means the pump is engaged and we are ready to pump. Now, this truck is an automatic transmission, and in this truck in particular, you put it into drive to do your pumping. And I believe, if I'm correct, Steve, that then selects fourth gear. Is that correct in this truck? Put it in drive, it takes it to fourth gear. If this truck were a manual transmission, you'd likely put it in third or fourth gear, or whatever the manufacturer's recommendations are. Okay, everybody, now we've got power to the pump. Steve's going to show us here how we have confirmed we have power to the pump. That light up there, Steve. Right there. Pump engaged when lit, okay to pump. So you know that you have successfully got the power from the road motor to your pump and you're ready to pump now. We're going to walk through a couple steps of a floor test. The full floor test is delineated in a sheet that's going to be part of the handout for part of the program, but this is a couple of the steps that allows us to get a little bit familiar with the pump panel and exercise a few of the features of the pump. So Steve here is going to go ahead, we've got power to the pump now, he's going to go ahead and open up tank to pump to allow us to get water from the carrying tank of the pump to the pump. Following that, we're going to open tank fill part of the way. In this particular engine, the intake to the pumper from the tank is a little bigger than the output back to the tank. If we leave that open, we have cavitation. We'll demonstrate that shortly. Now we're going to go ahead, Steve, and throttle us up to about 100 psi on our master discharge there. So if you look up at those big gauges there's your discharge. That's your net discharge. We're going to take that to 100 psi. I'm going to have to close that valve down a little more, Steve. All right, so we did hear a little bit of cavitation there. If you go ahead and open up that, Steve, we'll try to listen here. I'm not sure if we'll pick it up or not. Go ahead and pull it out. That noise that sounds like gravel is cavitation. We'll be talking about that later in the program. We haven't talked about it already. We're over pumping our supply, and that'll be talked about in the program here. But right now we're at 100 psi. We're circulating water from the tank through the pump and back into the tank. Part of the floor test is letting this run for 10 minutes. It just lets the pump stretch its legs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, Steve, and crank up to 150 psi. And this pump has a a discharge relief valve. That can be seen right over here, that total pressure master. So right now we're letting it pump at 150, but if Steve winds that down to 100, what that's going to do is shunt water back to the intake side of the pump. So go ahead, Steve, thank you. The light has come on, that means the valve is open, and if you come over here to the discharge, you'll see that it's now down to 100 because it's shunting water back to the intake side of the pump. If Steve goes ahead and starts to close that again, go ahead and pan back up. We pan back over to the intake and or the discharge, and watch what happens to the pressure as he closes that valve. He sets the valve at a higher pressure. It allows it to go back up to 150. This is part of a floor test as well. You're exercising that pressure valve. We'll see a diagram of that during the class. But again, that's something when you're on scene, if we only want to pump at whatever setting, and someone else, we have 3 lines going, and someone shuts down a line or two, and there's a spike in pressure, that valve protects you from overpressurizing the pump or overpressurizing the guys on the other end of the line. All right, Steve, we can go ahead and wind down the throttle a little bit. There we go. The other things to mention here when you're looking at this are where's our overheat lights, Steve? If you ever had a point where you were going to heat the pump up too much, they're down over here. If you know you're pumping water and that creates friction, which creates heat, those lights will come on. There's a test button on there you can push, and they usually light up to show you that they're working. If they're not, that's something you would address. Another thing you do during your floor test is testing the primer to make sure it works. So go ahead and show them where the priming handle is, Steve. Priming handle is there, and go ahead and give it a tug and we'll listen. Priming pump works. Go ahead and let it go. Priming pump works, and there has been liquid come out the bottom of the truck that shows you that we've moved some liquid and the priming pump is working. And that is some of the highlights of a floor test. Head, Steve, when you were doing stuff earlier, I was just watching what you were doing. You closed it slow, which is great because you want to avoid that water hammer that's going to shutter the whole thing. And I misspoke a little bit earlier. It's actually the reason we were getting cavitation there was that the discharge out of the pump, the tank fill is bigger than the intake. We were overdrawing the intake. I think I switched that around, and that's something I want to correct here. But we just run this a couple times, let it open, let it close, and that provides us a little bit of an exercise of that valve to make sure it doesn't get gummed up. And what's nice about this test, it's easy, and you can do it, once a week. You don't have to go anywhere. Pull the truck right out on the bib, or if you had it all outfitted with an exhaust system, you could even do it in the hall. Go ahead. Hit that again, Steve.
You've got to make sure your throttle's closed the whole way, but whenever you're traveling back down the road, your jake brake isn't going to work.
And that's a huge safety feature,
yes.
A massive safety feature, so we certainly would not want to disable that. That's a great point, thank you. All right, so now we've run through those steps and sections of the floor test, some of the highlights. We're going to go ahead and shut this thing down now, and there is certainly a right way to do that as well. So Steve here is going to go ahead and take us down to an idle. Drops truck to idle, and he's reinforcing the fact we need to turn that down on this truck so we don't lose our jake brake later going down the road, which would be a terrible thing. So always make sure that throttle's down and secured. After that, he's going to go ahead and close his tank fill, and then tank pump. And this is where it may change depending upon your department's regulations. Up here in the north, winters are cold, water freezes, so we run the pump dry so that we don't get out on the scene somewhere and freeze it up. If your jurisdiction's warm all the time, some places want you to have water in the pump at all times. But Steve's going to go ahead and drain the pump for us here now that everything else is closed. Our cameraman, Mr. Pete Brink here, is going ahead and he's going to show us the water that drains out of the pump. And that's something you want to go ahead and confirm. You leave the pump drains open until the pump is completely dry. Pay attention to the water draining out of your pump. If it continues to drain and drain and drain and drain, there may be a problem with your tank to pump valve, and you may be just draining your entire tank through that pump. Once it's done draining, we'll go ahead and close those drains up so that later on we don't have any problem with trying to draft or wondering why we're not pumping the adequate pressure. Steve, anything else you think we need to interject in here?
No, I think we're good.
Very good. You're not just a pretty face, Steve. He's not just a talent. All right, so now our next step is, now that our pump is draining, while we wait for that to happen, we're going to go ahead and take the pump out of gear and get us ready for the road again. So Steve's basically going to reverse the procedure from before. So the pump is turning in gear. We need to get them into neutral here and confirm that we're in neutral. We're good there. We're in neutral?
Yes.
Very good. Now we go ahead and take the pump out of gear. Give it a moment and then move it back up to road. We're in the road gear. And if Steve were going to pull away now, what he'd do is put his foot on the brake, release the parking brake, and subsequently drive away. So that's how you reverse the steps of putting the pump into gear, getting power to the pump, and now power is away from the pump and going back to the transfer case to the road wheels. So we're in here in the station now with our new unit. There's a few nuances of this truck you're not going to see in every pump because of the specialty nature of this unit. It's a four-wheel drive. And it's just a different configuration, and you can see here, nice big warning, transfer case must be in high range and front axle must be disengaged while pumping, meaning you can't be in four-wheel drive and you have to be in high range, not low range. Steve, go ahead and show us a couple of the things here. Steve was talking to me earlier about a couple of the other issues with this truck that make it a little different.
The put it in pump gear, to switch it from road mode to pump mode, it's different. You don't have the big air switch. You only have this red electronic rocker switch right here. And you also have to have the foot brake applied when you put your pump in gear.
So not only the parking brake you're saying, Steve, but you also have to have your foot actually on the brake when you go to do that.
Yes.
And there are two lights here versus one indicator light. Pump is engaged and it's okay to pump. So that's the other thing versus just one light that shows you what's going on. These are your controls in this particular unit for your high and low transfer case, the four-wheel drive and such. So this truck is a little bit different in that regard. Another unique feature we have on one of the trucks here is what's called an air primer, which is different. We talk about primers in class, and this is mentioned in the PowerPoint as well, but just showing you a little bit of the practical setup here. Steve, go ahead and run us through a couple things here. We've got all these things that say primer. It's not just one switch like the other trucks. So what's going on here?
You got your master primer. You can prime all your intakes at once if you just put that down on prime. Or you could only do one side at a time if you're trying to draft off of your left or right side. Just push the button. No, go ahead, please.
And then once you do draw your prime and you open up your suction gates, just switch that up to auto prime and leave it there the whole time you're drafting. That'll take care of any cavitation issues automatically.
Oh, that's fabulous. I had no understanding of this. This is some new technology, so this is something that we wanted to make note of. This isn't your standard pump things. This just kind of shows you over time how much things change. And the nice part is, making our lives on the fire ground a bit easier, a little less babysitting.
There's no moving parts. It's all an air Venturi system, and it's a lot more efficient than your traditional electrically driven priming pumps.
Yeah, that's my understanding from this company is they're even offering abilities to convert your truck if you want to. Just full disclosure here, we're not getting any kickbacks from Trident or anything, but we're just actually fairly impressed with what's going on with this product. The other thing about this truck that we have on several of our trucks is a governor. This is a different setup. We'll again talk about this more in class in greater detail, but this is a different setup than the truck that we were outside working with earlier that had that pressure switch, meaning the RPM of the truck doesn't change, it's just shunting water from the discharge to the intake. This truck and other trucks we have here has a governor that actually changes the RPM of the truck. It will either adjust it up or down depending upon the demands and what you have it set on. Steve, give us a little more details on some of that.
You can adjust your pressure via your RPM by turning the knob and watch your main discharge valve, or gauge, or you can switch it up to the pressure, and then you would read your pressure up in that area.
you have two different ways that you can set this. If you want certain lines only running whatever pressure is one thing, or if you don't want your truck only cranking so much, it's the other thing.
Right.
I got you. And the whole premise here is if, so you have 2 or 3 lines running and someone shuts a line off, there's, I guess, less demand on the truck then, right? So the RPM, the truck could idle down.
Yeah, and if you have your pressure set, say 100, and somebody shuts off a line, the other line that's still being used, you're not going to see that pressure spike. It'll keep it at whatever you have it preset as.
Gotcha. So this also helps kind of that shutter and slam on the pump.
Yes.
And the other thing would be if there's the scene where you have multiple lines running at one time, kind of helps you out as a pump operator so you don't get overtaxed.
Yes.
Very good.